And so many of you guys know up in Whatcom County and also in Skagit, our farm fields are drained through both drainage ditches as well as drain tiles. The idea of sub-irrigation using these water level control structures is that you can have the fields be draining all winter and spring, and then in the spring, after you've got out there, done your first field work, you can control the drainage using these control structures and actually hold the water back from draining from your fields. They're fairly affordable structures, and they're big and tall, and you buy them based on the depth of your drain tiles or your drainage ditch, and you dig down and you put these in line with your drain tiles or your ditch. And whenever they're totally open, water just passes through like it's a normal drain tile. But whenever you want to start to hold the water back, you can put in these baffles or stop logs, and they will they kind of get taller and taller, and so upstream of that water level control structure, you can theoretically raise up the water table enough to have your plants be able to reach water. And another thing you can do to even supplement this is to actually add water back to your system into a drainage ditch and try to hold that water back that way. And so the potential benefits of using these water level control structures are that it could improve your yield on your field, as well as require less overhead irrigation work. You're going to maximize the use of the rainfall that's already falling, as well as overhead irrigation, because it's going to be holding that water back from draining out of your fields. Finally, there is potentially water quality benefits from using these. If you have less kind of drainage seeping through your field, you can have less like nutrients leaching, less potential issues from manure getting down like a crack in the field that's going to a drain tile. And so there's these other added benefits too. If you're interested in learning more about these, we are actively collecting data here in Whatcom County to try to get some data behind, like, yes, this is something that works well here and that you could kind of like retrofit into a system that you already have.
I want to talk to you a little bit about automation that you can do on these and how you can improve and make these a little bit better, because they have a few different trade-offs. These will run for like 10 hours, and in the middle of a run, it may stop for some reason. Let's say that one's run by an actual like gas lawnmower engine. So it might run out of gas, or it might stop for some reason. Maybe it comes out of gear. And that means that this irrigation reel will flood that field until you come and take a look at it. So a typical one might be like you set it out in the middle of the night. You say, okay, it's going to come in at around 5 o'clock in the morning. And then let's say at 1 o'clock it stops. So you can imagine half an acre out there just being completely inundated with water. So we made a device that's a universal retrofit that goes on any pump and any reel that will allow when this reel stops for any reason, it can shut off that paired pump. So that is automatically keeping you from, having those flood events. But you also get an app that has real-time data, so you can see exactly where these guys are at. It gives you record keeping, so you know which swaths that you've done. And it also lets you know you can control it from any place in the world. The other really nice thing about a device like this is that it gives you application rate data. So one of the frustrating things is like, I don't know if you all know the bathroom timers that you use when you go in the shower, but when the farmers use those exact same timers for the pumps that they hook these up to. So what's the first thing that you do when you go into the shower and you want to turn that timer? You crank it much higher than you need to. So that means that when these get done, they usually run for a good 30 minutes afterwards, just because you don't want it to turn off the water before it comes in. So our device cuts down on that kind of waste quite a bit. I can tell you a bunch of different factors about like one of the reasons why you might want something like this. We found that we got an 8% water reduction of gross water usage. We also found that 1 in 20 runs of these fail. So a pair of these devices pays for itself basically in the first year. Basically pretty quickly. And it's also just for peace of mind too. When my brother and I founded this company, we just basically wanted to help out farms like my family farm. And one of the biggest stressors is having to wake up in the middle of the night or not knowing what's going on.
The other thing to remember is we're putting nutrients, we pay money, right? Even if we're using dairy manure and spreading it out there, it costs us money to get those nutrients out onto the field. And we want the maximum use out of those nutrients that we can get. And when those nutrients, they're gonna stay in the soil, except they're gonna move. The only way they can move out of the soil is either when you haul it off of the field by harvesting it and hauling it off of there, or it's gonna move with the water, right? Or it volatilizes and goes into the air. But a large source of water loss in a field is that it gets dissolved into the water, and then it moves, and then we put too much water on, and those nutrients get lost out of the bottom of the profile. And so we lose the benefit from those nutrients. So we want to do good irrigation scheduling. And so what we do is we've put together a model that models the crop water use rate, or we call it evapotranspiration, or ET. So evaporation plus transpiration, that's the amount of water that the crop is being evaporated up out of your fields on any given day. So the way that this app works is it keeps track of what's called the soil water deficit, or field capacity is full, how far down you are from full, which gives you the amount of space that's in the soil for you to apply additional water, so that you can have an idea of when to irrigate and how much water to apply. So that is one tool that we can use to do irrigation scheduling. The other thing that we do for irrigation scheduling is we can measure of water that's in this soil. We can get an estimate. So there's two things that we can measure. We can either measure the soil water tension, or how hard the soil is gripping onto those soil particles. The other thing that we can measure is soil water content, or the volume of water that's in this soil. Let's say my soil water volume is 20%. We need a depth. We need to turn that into an inches of water that we need to apply, right? And so all you do is you multiply that by the depth of the root zone that you're managing. And then you compare that to what your field capacity is. And then we've put some tools together to give you an estimate of what field capacity should be for any particular soil. That's on irrigation.wsu.edu, to give you a starting point as to what some values are. So for these types of sensors, this is a soil water tension sensor. A good number is like anywhere from 30 to 60 centibars is where you want to irrigate before it gets to 30 to 60 centibars. This one here is also a soil water tension sensor. This one is a manual one. It does not connect. You have to go out and read it manually, but you would fill this. It's just basically a tube that you would fill with water. And they're different lengths because we want to measure it at different depths, right? So we put that in contact with the soil. The soil pulls the water out of there as it dries down. And if you irrigate, water moves back in because the tension in here pulls that water back in. And we can measure that tension directly with a vacuum gauge. That's all that this is a vacuum gauge, and it's measuring what the soil water tension is.
We have a 10-foot tall piece of 8-inch pipe, and it's got a ring lock fitting on the bottom to fit on top of our risers. And we'll pick the highest point on a section of line that we're trying to test. And first we'll flush that line with water, and then we'll fill the pipe with water. It's got a clear sight glass on the side, measured with marks on it every foot. There's a formula that you use for the length of pipe and the size of pipe to determine how much leak you're allowed to have in that 10-foot tall stand pipe. And so it's within a 2-hour period that you just measure your loss and whether if it's in the acceptable range. For a section of line, you can do it in a day. It just it takes a little time to set things up, and then for flushing lines and everything, making sure there's no air pockets. Yeah, so basically it's just a leak down test. It's really, I mean, not really a pressure test per se. It is putting head pressure on the line, but it's just checking for leaks.
And what time of year do you tend to do that?
In the late winter, just before we go to use the pipeline again.